Slavery in general is a very important topic for anyone to be aware of, but for this purpose, the Atlantic slave trade particularly is the main focus of this presentation. As you may remember reading, the Atlantic slave trade began in the 16th century with Spanish and Portuguese explorers. They originally went to Africa in search of gold and salt in the Sahara Desert, but in an attempt to extend their empires in the Americas and various other places, they needed laborers to help do this. There came in the Africans. Eventually, the triangular trade network happened. The first step was the outward passage from Europe to Africa. These exports included copper, cloth, guns, ammunition, and other manufactured goods. Then, Africa to the Americas was called the Middle Passage. This had the African slaves and other products. Then, the homeward passage from the Americas back to Europe. So, this had sugar, rum, molasses, and tobacco. It was a very long process getting the slaves onto the boat. After they were captured, they were all chained to each other by their hands and their feet and herded like animals into pens where they waited to board the ship. Several slaves were taken on small boats at a time to get to the large ship in which they would spend their voyage on. The slaves were then crammed into tiny spaces with very little room underneath the ship. They lived on barely any food, and the food's quality was not good by any means. The smells in the place where all the slaves stayed was unbearable, to say the least, and many caught diseases and died. In the picture shown here, it shows a drawing of the disease getting thrown off the ship, and it's what they call a no-good product anymore. When slaves finally reached land, they were separated based on their condition as well as strength and ability. They were auctioned off and had to stand there while the people yelled out prices. Based on their color of their skin, they were easy to find if they ran away. This is part of the reason why Africa was an ideal place to get laborers, but, however, they were branded so owners knew who belonged to who. The cruelty of slavery definitely outweighs the fact that the economy could have been better, but more laborers equals more farming, which means more jobs, which also means a better economy. The Atlantic slave trade was an essential part of the economic growth in the 16th century. The discovery of gold and silver in the new land also helped the economy. By producing more material goods, crops, and other items, trade began to increase all over the world. This made more jobs, for example, being part of the trade industry and merchants. This is a primary source of a boy who was kidnapped for slavery, whose name is Ulado Ikino. I was immediately handled and tossed up to see if I were sound by some of the crew, and I was now persuaded that I had gotten into a world of bad spirits, and that they were going to kill me. The closeness of the place and the heat of the climate added to the number in the ship, which was crowded that each had scarcely room to turn himself. It almost suffocated us. The shrieks of women and the groans of dying rendered the whole scene and the horror almost inconceivable.